Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're zooming out, way out, to look at the global diplomatic chessboard. We are diving into the intricate, incredibly high-stakes world of international diplomacy to see exactly how regional alliances are actively addressing global security. We're going to use a massive convergence of recent diplomatic meetings as our lens to make sense of it all. We have some truly fascinating ground to cover, so let's get right to it. So think about it for a second. It's kind of the defining puzzle of our era. How exactly do nations protect their interests in a world that feels, well, completely unpredictable right now? Gone are the days when a country could just rely on a single, static alliance and call it a day. Today, modern global security requires a dynamic, multi-layered approach. Nations are constantly negotiating this incredibly complex web of multilateral frameworks and bilateral relationships just to ensure their economic and physical survival. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer gravity of the situation. This quote is from India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. He pointed out that energy, food, and health security can simply no longer be taken for granted. And he's right, especially when you consider our heavy reliance on maritime trade. When fundamental, everyday necessities are put at risk due to global disruptions, diplomacy isn't just about smiling for the cameras and shaking hands. It's quite literally about survival and stability. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to take a zoom-in, zoom-out journey today. We'll kick things off with the Manila diplomatic gathering, then explore ASEAN and regional security, look at the Quad's Indo-Pacific focus, zoom in on bilateral talks and managing tensions, and finally, look at navigating the future together. Let's start with Section 1, the Manila diplomatic gathering. What makes these July 2026 meetings so compelling is the sheer overwhelming density of diplomacy that happened in just one single location. Manila wasn't just hosting an event, it served as the hub for multiple crucial security frameworks all happening simultaneously. We saw the ASEAN-India meetings, the East Asia Summit, the ASEAN Regional Forum, and even a Quad foreign ministers meeting taking place right on the margins of each other. It's like a giant puzzle where this overlap allows leaders to tackle regional and global issues across different alliances without ever having to leave the city limits. Moving right along to Section 2, ASEAN and regional security. Now, before we look at the specific goals of the summit, we have to understand the foundational concept driving the whole thing, and that is ASEAN centrality. It sounds like a think tank buzzword, right? But it's actually the widely accepted principle that ASEAN itself should be the dominant driving force in regional cooperation and the broader security architecture of the Asia-Pacific. Basically, when external powers come in to engage with Southeast Asia, they do so with the strict understanding that ASEAN is the one in the driver's seat. With the Philippines holding the chairship in 2026, their chosen theme is navigating our future together. The practical, on-the-ground focus here is all about peace and security anchors and prosperity corridors. The Philippines envoy made it clear that this translates to very real, very practical measures, like supporting supply chain resilience, which is a huge deal given the ongoing crisis in West Asia. It's also about securing absolutely basic necessities, like energy and food security, amidst all these crazy global geopolitical shifts. And naturally, a critical piece of that security puzzle is the ocean. 2026 was specifically designated as the ASEAN-India Year of Maritime Cooperation. Because think about it, so much of the region's prosperity is completely dependent on maritime trade, meaning any disruption out on the water becomes a massive source of anxiety for everyone involved. Therefore, observing international law and maintaining absolute freedom of navigation, it's not just a nice-to-have, it is vital for a stable, shared future. All right, let's shift gears to Section 3, the Quad's Indo-Pacific focus. It's super interesting when you contrast these frameworks side by side. A really clear division emerges. ASEAN's goals are incredibly broad. They focus heavily on things like socioeconomic development, economic integration, digital transformation, and inclusive growth for all its member states. But then you look at the Quad, which is made up of India, the US, Japan, and Australia, and they are highly specific. They are laser-focused on security, explicitly targeting a free and open Indo-Pacific and ensuring maritime stability. Yet, despite these major differences in scope, the Quad explicitly came out and reaffirmed its unwavering support for ASEAN unity and centrality. This wasn't an accident. It was a very deliberate move to reassure Southeast Asia that the Quad isn't trying to overshadow ASEAN's authority. And this reassurance is particularly notable when you look at the timing.
I mean, this meeting happened just 2 days after a reported clash between Filipino and Chinese vessels near the Second Thomas Shoal in the South China Sea, an event that obviously sent regional security concerns skyrocketing.
Okay, zooming in even further now for Section 4, bilateral talks and managing tensions.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer volume of high-stakes, one-on-one diplomacy happening behind the scenes. India's external affairs minister was basically running a rapid-fire matrix of critical security discussions. I mean, look at this lineup. With Russia's Sergei Lavrov, the focus was civilian shipping safety. With China's Wang Yi, the strict prerequisite of border peace was put right on the table. And with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, talks ranged all the way from trade agreements to serious concerns over a potential blockade in the Strait of Hormuz.
But as we analyze all this, we have to pause and remember that these high-level, closed-door talks are directly tied to real, tragic human costs. Just prior to these meetings, 4 Indian nationals lost their lives in a missile strike on a commercial vessel, the MV Golden Leo. This horrific incident fundamentally shaped the bilateral talks between India and Russia in Manila. India's government actually summoned the Russian envoy and formally conveyed grave concerns and unequivocal condemnation regarding the attack, which had happened just as the ship was departing a Ukrainian port. So, in his meeting with Lavrov, Minister Jaishankar strictly advocated for the safety of civilian shipping, making it crystal clear that attacks targeting international maritime commerce are simply unacceptable. That brings us to another massive bilateral dynamic on the board. Since October 2024, India and China have actually taken some gradual steps toward normalization. We're talking about resuming direct flights, updating visa regimes, restarting the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, and even recommencing border trade. However, during the bilateral meeting in Manila, India made it absolutely clear that, hey, while these steps are totally welcome, strict peace and tranquility in the border areas remains the absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite for entirely normal ties. Rounding out these bilateral talks were some crucial meetings with North American partners, which just goes to show that Indo-Pacific security is truly a global concern. Discussions with the U.S. covered an interim trade agreement, defense, critical minerals, and regional stability. Additionally, a meeting with Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand focused on steadily advancing the bilateral cooperation goals that had been previously set by both nations' prime ministers. Finally, let's pull the camera all the way back out for Section 5, navigating the future together. So, what does this massive, complex web of multilateral and bilateral meetings actually mean for global security? Well, it all comes down to strategic synergies. The Philippines envoy noted the immense potential between India and ASEAN. Both have incredible mineral deposits and raw materials. Both have rapidly growing manufacturing capabilities. By integrating these strengths, they can build highly resilient supply chains. This deep cooperation expands economic options and, crucially, it reduces their dependence on a limited set of traditional partners, making the whole region far more secure. So the crucial point is captured perfectly, once again, by Minister Jaishankar. It is only through deeper cooperation that we can de-risk and diversify. In a totally unpredictable world, you just don't put all your eggs in one basket. You create overlapping frameworks, you maintain open dialogues even with your rivals, and you build resilient, diversified supply chains with your partners to de-risk our collective future. Which leaves us with a pretty massive question. Given all the complexities we've just unpacked today, from ASEAN centrality to Quad security goals to fraught bilateral tensions, are overlapping alliances now the absolutely only viable path to stability in our multipolar world? It's a provocative question regarding the future architecture of global diplomacy, and it's one that these nations are actively, desperately trying to answer. Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep learning.